Lethal Company. It's a game. Lethal Company has had plenty of updates I've been needing to cover over the past few months, but I was debating myself back and forth on how to properly introduce the game's new mechanics and new features. So I decided it would be best to cover everything, again, updated. That's right, I'm remaking all of my guide videos back to back, starting out with the most requested updated guide, Lethal Company's Moons. So let's just do our usual overview and get to each individual moon, shall we? Each moon has a certain weather status that can create an even harder time traversing it. There's 5 in total, so let's run through them and how to deal with them for anyone who's new here. To start, foggy weather makes a moon's exterior incredibly hard to see, which, with how many enemies can be lurking around, can be a seriously crazy thing to have to deal with. This is getting a C tier for its difficulty, as its difficulty really depends how well you know the moon's exterior. Some of the moon updates have made this even more difficult, with some crazy hard to navigate terrain as well. Rainy weather doesn't add much other than the rain noise and quicksand. Massive patches of dark quicksand appear around the map that you have to avoid stepping in to avoid drowning, and sometimes these can be hard to spot if you aren't careful. Fun fact, 2 of these actually have static spawns 100% of the time on both March and Adamance. I don't think it's too difficult, so I'll rank rainy weather at D tier so long as you're good at spotting quicksand patches. Flooded moons have a particularly varied amount of difficulty depending on the elevation of the path you have to take to get from the ship to the entrance of the bunker. How this works is that over time, the heavy rain will flood the entire outside area, and if you are underwater for more than a few seconds, you drown instantly. I'll give flooded moons in general an A tier for this reason. The main way to deal with flooded moons is to really learn the map and which entrances are the highest in elevation, as well as grabbing the lightest loot possible. The heavier you are, the harder it is to surface above these lakes of flooding water as well. Stormy moons, like most of these, are really self-explanatory, where instead of heavy rain or normal rain, you have a lightning rain, raining down everyone and zapping anything that fucking breathes oxygen. If you have anything metallic on you, which is a surprising amount of things, you'll hear a little tingle grow louder until you get zapped. So yeah, definitely giving Stormy an A tier. It's more so just annoying. Sometimes a lightning strike can even hit you out of nowhere without holding metal. The only advice I could really give is to hold only a couple of metallic objects at a time. That way you don't have to juggle literally everything in your inventory trying to avoid Zeus himself. Eclipse moons fucking suck. Have I said that before? Wait a minute. These fucking moons have all nighttime enemies spawn outside from the second you land, making everything unnecessarily harder. S tier. Want to know how to avoid them? Okay, tired editing me here to input, I think just once, but we'll find out. Version 64 came out, meteor strikes are a new weather event. They're extremely rare, and if you do end up getting one, I'd go ahead and rank it in A tier as meteors rain down from the sky that can instantly kill you. Okay, little snippet over. Now that I've gotten the weather out of the way, another thing I'll have to cover on these moons are the 3 different interiors. The bunker, the manor, and the newest of the 3, the mineshaft. So let's start with that one to give some new information to some of you rewatchers. To start things off fresh, the mineshaft is the newest interior added to the game. When you get inside the main entrance of the mineshaft, you'll be greeted with an elevator and a minecart. This area is relatively safe until you get down below the surface with the elevator. This is a really interesting mechanic that can be found in some of the game's earliest iterations, such as its earliest teaser trailer. This mineshaft interior comes with some cool new rooms to explore, as you can probably tell by this footage. There's slopes that go up and down in elevation, minecarts all over, and yellow double doors leading to and from rooms. I learned a tip from a channel called Bread that these doors actually open away from the nearest entrance or exit, so navigating this interior is relatively easy with this in mind. You can also tell what direction the door would open towards depending on what type of handle it has. If it has this bigger gray looking handle, it's opening towards the entrance. If it has the lever looking handle, then it goes away from the entrance. Some yellow doors even have a cool blue light above them. I wonder where this leads. Oh god. I forgot to mention this. The mineshaft has 3 main sections. The first facility, its cave system, and the second facility that the cave connects to. The mineshaft is the first of its kind to have 2 different looking aesthetics for one type of interior. So I should probably finish off talking about the mineshaft with this cave system. There's some cool bits to note, such as loot piles scattered around, deep pits that will kill you if you fall in, and a new interior water pit that can lead you places in the cave, so long as you pass swim school, that is. These cave systems are long and windy, and overall harder to traverse than the facility. They also have two notable differences to the facility, where they generate more loot, generally, and they spawn enemies throughout these horrifying cracks in the wall instead of vents. So yeah, new interior. Pretty exciting stuff. Let's just quickly cover the older two as well here. The bunker is the most iconic interior, and the most common as well when you're first starting out the game. This is the layout that has the long scaffolding line hallways and air section, concrete hallways everywhere, smoke valve leaks, and the apparatus room. The most important things to note are the types of loot rooms, such as the server room, generator room, the factory room. Also keep in mind that these can have some of the longest hallways, dangerous smoke leaks, and dark death pits you can fall into basically everywhere. The doors don't always swing away from the entrance here, but will if the door is opening from a metal scaffolding room to another scaffolding room, or a brick wall room to another brick wall room. But these two are pretty hard to keep track of, so try not to use this 100% of the time. Because there's not a surefire trick to get back to the entrance like there is in the mineshaft and the manor, we'll get to it. I'd say a bunker is relatively harder to explore than the other two. Speaking of the manor, it's the last of the three interiors to cover. When you first enter a manor, you'll be greeted with a large entrance hall with a catwalk on top and doors all over leading to different places. The manor has wood flooring, typical rooms like kitchens, libraries, and living rooms, and typically don't pose much of a threat on their own without traps, as there aren't any pits to fall into. I think manors are the easiest of the three in my opinion for this reason. Take note that manors have more open areas, which makes dealing with enemies a bit harder sometimes depending on the enemy and a bit easier sometimes depending on the other enemies. Also use railings, tables, and height to your advantage here, as the building is a lot more vertically dense than the other two. I know that was a long overview, but now that we're done with all the general information stuff, let's get to the exciting stuff, the three new moons. Adamance is the first of the three newest moons of this video. I'll cover these three in a more detailed style, then get a bit more speedy and concise with the others since I've made another guide on them. Watch my previous, slightly outdated moons guide if you haven't already done so, to get a more detailed version for the other moons. Adamance is a moon rated B by Sigurd's danger level, and I'd actually rank it a C tier. Adamance has one of the smallest exteriors in the game, being more vertically complex as it has a big ravine separating the ship and the entrance. This moon has its fire entrance off to the side with a parkour jump. Its main entrance can be accessed by climbing through the ravine like this, or braving the rickety bridge. For both Val and Adamance, I'd recommend never taking more than 10 pounds on this bridge at a time, and instead take an alternative route. Adamance gets its C tier rating, in my opinion, let me preface that, as a result of its difficult to enter interior and the enemies around the place, which I'll do a quick rundown with this chart from the wiki here. You'll notice that some harder enemies spawn commonly outside and inside, such as bunker spiders, thumpers, man-eaters, baboon hawks, and eyeless dogs. Speaking of its interior, Adamance also spawns pretty frequently as both the factory and the mineshaft, with a semi-rare 3% chance to spawn as the manor. Embrion is the worst fucking moon in the game, and I'm not going to give it much of the light of the day, just a fair fucking warning. Let me just give you a 5-second scenic overlook so you get what I mean. Yep, this moon is a desolate, hot, Mars-like hellscape with nothing outside but a parkour main entrance. Parkour main entrance, by the way. You can't just get to the main entrance normally, like with a fucking ladder, or by walking to it. You have to jump to it from this little hill. The fire exit's a little bit easier to get into, but getting into the bunker being a little bit harder is the least of your worries. There are too many old fucking birds, which are one of the hardest enemies in the game. It also costs 150 fucking credits to travel to for some reason, when there are always a dozen or so old birds waiting for you outside for literally no reason. I'll go ahead and stop talking about the outside because I'm gonna have a brain aneurysm if I keep raging over this shit. But the interior of Embrion is actually pretty tame. If you can stomach the lifetime supply of fucking traps, it's so stupid. There's a max indoor enemy count of only 8, but there's fucking hundreds of traps when you walk in there. The most common interior enemies are hoarding bugs, barbers, and thumpers, but honestly you don't really need to worry about that much because most of your time is going to be spent avoiding turrets, landmines, and spike traps. Embrion is usually the bunker interior, but can be the mineshaft 15% of the time and the manor on rare occasions. Anyways, I feel like I've wasted enough breath on this fucking moon. Fuck Embrion, S tier difficulty, moving on. Now we're getting to the last of the 3 newest moons added to Lethal Company that I haven't covered before, Artifice. Artifice has a similar exterior to Embrion in Offense, but has a smaller map with some cool additions and, oh my god, no. So yeah, there's old birds here too, but not as many as Shitryon. Still a threat though. Anyways, Artifice has these 4 garages on the outside, providing you with some cover as you navigate to and from its entrance. Artifice has a really cool feature with these garages too, where you can actually lock yourself inside or lock other things inside. Another interesting and difficult thing about Artifice, which makes sense given its insanely large amount of loot on the interior, is that it has essentially every enemy on the interior spawning at relatively even rates. And with an indoor power level of 13, this means you'll never really know what you're going to run into. On the outside though, old birds, forest giants, and eyeless dogs are super common. Artifice also spawns as pretty much all 3 interiors evenly. I'd rank Artifice at an A tier for its difficulty, because so long as you can get in and out of the facility quickly, like with a cruiser or with friends, you'll deal with less and less old birds as you make your way back because they spawn more frequently as the day goes on, and they activate more frequently as well. Plus, unlike fucking Embrion, you'll actually have some cover to work with in the form of these warehouses. One main thing to note at the end too that I haven't talked about because I kinda gassed Artifice up is that it costs more than any other moon in the game to travel to, by a lot. Titan costs 700, which we'll get to later. Artifice costs 1,500 credits. By the time you get the 1,500 credits to go to Artifice, you'll have witnessed the company committed so many heinous acts against the Geneva Convention that it'll make your head spin. Now that I've finally covered the newer moons of the game, I'll start up a faster rundown of the older moons, starting with... is the easiest moon in the game, and also has some of the worst loot in the game. Go figure. This balance between loot and difficulty is a common theme that Seekers balance really well with these moons. The entrance is a straight shot from the ship, serving to introduce you to the game's core mechanics. The fire exit is to the left of the main entrance, and the map itself is just a barren wasteland. The outside can spawn circuit bees, eyeless dogs, and worms, as well as the occasional forest giant. The inside commonly spawns spiders, snare fleas, and slimes. I'd rank Experimentation at D. It's the easiest moon in the game, and strategy-wise, try to clear everything out, as most oftentimes it doesn't have any more than 300 or 400 credits worth of loot, and it spawns a maximum of 12 pieces of scrap. It also has a 98% chance to spawn as the bunker interior, which will likely be your first experience in the game. Assurance is the second listed moon with a desert-like exterior with mountains, boulders, and one of the coolest fire exits in the game. I've always loved this fire exit to death because you have to climb so high up on this ladder, you feel like a thrill seeker by the time you have to take that leap of faith from this massive boulder to this pipe. Assurance also has easier enemies to deal with, like Experimentation, ranging from snare fleas, spiders, man-eaters, worms, and eyeless dogs. Assurance has a couple of ways to get to the entrance of the bunker. You can loop around the long way like this, or take the shortcut over the mountain like this. The interior of Assurance can spawn as the factory or the mine shaft, with the manor popping in occasionally at 1%. Overall, I rank Assurance at a D tier as well, and I'd recommend it over Experimentation just because it has a little bit more loot. All you have to do to survive is not get caught with both a worm and a dog spawning outside, as that combination is really deadly, since when a worm is under you, you typically have to run, but when a dog is next to you, you typically can't run. Now we're getting to Val, which is actually a really important one that I need to cover because it has had a lot of really important changes since 62 came out. Hey, tired editing me again. I was going to say right here in this video that Val had a essentially guaranteed chance to get the new mineshaft interior, but as of version 64, this is no longer the case. So this entire point will be cut out of the video, thank you. Val's forest is home to a ravine similar to Adamance, and a bridge similar to Adamance as well. This is where the fire exit is located, and where circuit bees will frequently spawn from what I find. Speaking of enemies, Val's got a lot of bracken, man-eaters, forest giants, and baboon hawks. I'd recommend coming to Val more now than I did in the past, as the bracken and forest giants have a significantly lower spawn rate than they used to. But I'd still rank Val at a B tier for its difficulty because forest giants and bracken are still pretty difficult to deal with. However, because it has a frequent mineshaft interior, I actually find myself having an easier time looting from Val than I used to. The best way to deal with Val, in my opinion, if you're going to go there and you want to counter, is to bring a stun grenade, because the bracken and the forest giant are really well dealt with the stun grenade. Make as many trips through the ravine and the fire exit as possible, because if you have heavier loot, this is much more efficient to get to and from the ship. I'd actually recommend this for Adamance as well, but with Adamance it's a little bit tougher because the fire exit is a little bit more out of the way. Hey, hey fucker, by the way, if you like the content so far, why the fuck have you not subscribed yet? Bitch. Sorry, reminder over. Sorry. Offense is the next installment of the Breaking Bad series. When you first get into offense, you can get into the bunker by either parkouring like I did first try, I totally did this first try, or go the long way around, traversing through a familiar terrain either around this rock or under this truck bed bridge, or up into the scaffolding. If you really want efficiency though, learn the pipe jump at the beginning, as it gets you into the bunker the quickest by far, through the fire exit. Anyways, offense is known for having a lot of harder enemies in the game locked away in its interior and roaming its exterior, including thumpers, coilheads, eyeless dogs, baboon hawks, and worms. Offense is also split 50-50 between the bunker and the mineshaft, with a rare chance to spawn a manor. I rank offense as a B tier because of its enemies and the difficult terrain. Also, good luck dealing with stormy or eclipse variants here. Best thing you could do is get in and out before a lot of coilheads spawn in. March has actually turned into one of my favorite moons. March has a similar forest-like aesthetic to Val, with a large lake in the center, a river surrounding it, and these fire exits. Here's all the locations in relation to the ship. Feel free to pause the video if you need to look for a second. March is known most for some pretty tough enemies, such as the Thumper, Spider, Bracken, Forest Giant, and Baboon Hawks. March has almost exclusively the factory interior, so if you want a forest with a new mineshaft interior, stick to Val. I'll put March at a solid B tier. The best way to traverse this moon is to utilize the fire exits as much as possible. You can get to the closest one twice as fast as the main entrance. It also has an extremely large interior map that I forgot to talk about, so be careful not to get lost inside for too long. Rend is the first of the 3 OG moons that has a price tag, a steep 500 credits. It's also the first moon with this desolate tundra environment, and it's canonically a white dwarf orbiting moon, which is why it's so cold. This makes it pretty hard to see outdoors, as there's a raging blizzard every time you land on the moon, preventing you from seeing more than like 10 feet in front of you. The fire exit on Rend is actually pretty out of the way as well. It's over by this random ravine 45 degrees to the right of your exit of the ship. Cool. The easiest way to navigate to the main entrance is actually by using these lights in the middle of the forest, which is kind of nice. Once you're inside, here's a list of some of the interior enemies you'll have to deal with. You can kind of tell now that the difficulty is starting to ramp up big time. Thankfully, by the time you leave, you only really have to deal with eyeless dogs and forest giants, but sometimes the worm shows up and oh my god, those percentages are fucking rough. Well, at least Rend has a decent amount of loot, and most commonly spawns as the manor interior. It also has a 19% chance to spawn as the mineshaft and a rare 1% for the bunker interior. I'll give it an A tier for its difficulty. The best way you can deal with Rend is to get some sort of movement item like a jetpack or cruiser if you have money for it, as the trip to either the fire exit or the main entrance is one of the longest in the game. Also, be extra careful about forest giants as they can see crystal clear through lizards. This is true for Dine too, and speaking of Dine, Rend and Dine are kind of like sister moons in my opinion. They're very similar in layout, interiors, enemies, and difficulty. The first difference you'll notice though is that Dine costs 100 more credits to travel to. This is due to slightly more loot value, but this doesn't come with an easier time for you, as is the way of the highly high danger balance this game uses. Dine's exterior has been updated since the last time I covered it, so I'll go over the changes now. It was identical to Rend's exterior with the exception of its fire exit before, and now it has both entrances pretty close to one another, pretty far away from the ship, and without the lights to path you towards them. So let me give you a quick pathing guide real quick. Feel free to slow down or pause the video if you need any time. Okay, word, done. So Dine has an assortment of hard enemies as I said before, including a lot of newish butler enemies, barbers, jesters, nutcrackers, old birds, eyeless dogs, and forest giants, which I know sounds like a lot. Speaking of enemies, if you guys want to see an updated guide to each enemy in the game, as there have been a lot added and a lot of changes, let me know in the comments because I'm totally down to make that. Dine's most common interior is the manor, with a 65% chance. The mineshaft comes next with a 34% chance, and the bunker has a 1.5% chance to spawn as well, meaning that Dine has actually a higher chance to spawn the mineshaft. It might come to a surprise to some of you that I'll rank Dine at an S tier now, and this is for one reason I haven't mentioned yet. Aside from all of the really tough new enemies roaming around, Dine also has way too many fucking traps that I forgot to mention before. Not as many as Embrion, but the fact that I have to point it out is really saying something, isn't it? Last but not least, we have Titan. This is the one moon that even just by playing a bit more often now that I've come back to the game, I can tell it hasn't changed that much actually. One notable change is that the ship spawns a lot closer to the entrance, and with harsher fall damage added, this is a really good change as you have to be careful leaving the facility, as jumping off the edge in too much of a hasty fashion leads to your demise. Titan is another cold as fuck planet with a more industrial building than Rend or Dine awaiting you right as you get into the moon. The outside only really has eyeless dogs and forest giants, with the occasional old bird or worm, but the inside has literally any enemy you can think of except barbers for some reason. It also has the largest area spawn in the game. Titan also most frequently spawns as the bunker interior, with a 20% chance for one of the other two. Titan gets an A tier for its difficulty, because the exterior is one of the easiest of the arguably harder moons to deal with in the game. So yeah, I just did it again. I hope this guide was as informative as it could have been for returning or new people here. I know it's been a while, and I'm glad you've stayed until the end of the video. I appreciate all the time you give me, genuinely. I have a Discord server and Patreon down in the description of this video if you feel like you want to support me further. But go ahead and ring the bell and subscribe if you want to see the new enemies guide in the future. Some new content overall from Stardew, Lethal Company, Terraria, stuff like that is in the works. I'm hoping to get the new Lethal Company guide out within the next couple of weeks. But until then, that's pretty much it. That's the end. :3:3.